Hey guys, what's up? It's Nicole. Welcome back to my channel. Say hi, guys. We're having a kids' day at my house today. So, anyway, I just got done talking to Jason and watching his live stream and hanging out. And I kind of wanted to come on here and talk with you guys about addiction and I guess I've just kind of gotten to a point where I'm like past the whole distraction and argument of whether addiction is a disease or not, because I feel like that's already kind of been, well, I know it's already been proven in science. You know, actually the National Institution talks about how addiction is a disease, and it takes help and it takes a person getting help to get well. And it's not, we can't just stop on our own, like, strong will. You know what I mean? If we could have all, here's the deal. If addiction wasn't a disease and it was just us, you know, making bad choices all the time, how many of us would have stopped a long time ago? You know, and that's where, like, a lot of people forget, like, where, if you weren't struggling with this addiction, then why would you continue to do these things for 12, 13, 14, 15 years and put yourself in harm's way and do things that negatively affected you and hurt your family, hurt your loved ones, hurt yourself, hurt your job and the people making a living? And for me, like, I lost everything while I was in addiction. So I wanted to share with you guys about addiction, the process, and how we lose power of choice. How many of you guys have, how many of y'all have used when you didn't want to use? Like, you didn't want to use, but you had to. Like, you, with all the power in your heart, with all your mind, your body, and soul, you wanted to remain sober, but you used anyway. It was almost like I was being, you know, it's like my mind hijacked me, and I was, you know, I didn't want to use. I wanted to be sober. I wanted to change my life. I wanted desperately to be better and to not have to feel this way. And every form of will that I had, I would use, and I would try so hard. And there was times where I would make it. You guys, please stop. There was times where I would make it for months on white knuckling it, you know, white knuckling it with all my might, not using. And then what would happen is the willpower wasn't enough. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, when we use substances, it changes the chemistry in our brain. It changes everything. And that's why, you know, I try to help you guys to learn about the disease of addiction and the cycle that happens when we are in our active addiction. So the way that I was taught, and I'm sure the way a lot of other people are taught, is that it's a vicious cycle, okay, with addiction. And it starts out with a trigger, or the thought to use. Then we go into the thinking. Then we go into a mental obsession, okay? And while we're obsessing and we're finding our way to do or get our substance that we want to use, then we use. Not until we use. That phenomenon of craving is kicked in our minds, in our brains. And non-addicts do not have the phenomenon of craving. Non-addicts will not experience this. They will use and take it or leave it. But with an addict, the phenomenon of craving is kicked in. And that's when we start over the vicious cycle. And we trigger thought, obsession, use, vicious phenomenon of craving. And that's how it goes in a circle. So, you know, I'm not making this up. Like, the National Institution of Drug Addiction, and there's also a Harvard graduate who has stuff on it on Google. There's also the Center for Disease Control has an article on it. There's all kinds of proof out there that shows that the disease of addiction is a brain disorder. It's a mental illness, and It doesn't matter how much willpower you have. It doesn't matter how many, friends or good intentions. It doesn't matter. Like, if you have it, you've got to come to terms with that and then start fighting to learn about it. And the more you learn about addiction, the easier it will be to combat it. And that's the thing. Like, the more you know, it's like knowledge is power. And with a disease of addiction, that is so true. Knowledge is power. That's why it's so important for us to be able to pinpoint our triggers, look back into our past and see where, like, is stress something that we are triggered by, or when we were younger, did something happen that was traumatic that, sent us into a tailspin? Because what happens with alcoholics and addicts is we like the feeling produced by drugs and alcohol, and we like to change the way we feel. That's why we used. We wouldn't use for any other reason but to change the way we feel, because we like the feelings produced. Stop. Pick up the trash, Nate, and put it in the trash can, please. These boys are wrestling over here. Hold on. Let's pick it up together, Nate. Thank you, guys. Okay, if you're going to wrestle, you got to wrestle in your room, not here in the TV room, guys. Not in the TV room. Go wrestle in your room. Okay? Alcoholics and addicts like the effects produced by alcohol and drugs. And we use the alcohol and drugs as a coping mechanism. Okay. When we don't like the way we feel, or we're experiencing some kind of stress, or maybe we're at work and we need to put in extra hours and we need extra energy. This is the mind of an addict or an alcoholic will say, oh, well, I need to take this and it will help me. Okay. I know you guys know what I'm talking about. So I wish that I had a book that I could look here. Let me see. I wish I had like another computer I could Google on while I'm talking to you guys so I can read some things. So I want you guys to know that, I'm trying to help you guys learn. And I want you guys to not get distracted by what it's called, because it really doesn't matter, okay? It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you call it. We all struggle and have it, okay? That's what brought us together. We're people that normally would not mix. And look at us. We're all here seeking help and seeking support. And that's crazy to think about it. Like, I look around at you guys and we would have never have found each other. But our common peril, our common struggle brought us together. Okay, so I want to kind of like read some stuff with you guys because I think it's really important. So I wanted to read to you guys the 12 steps, and I wanted to read with you guys how you can break them down in layman terms and maybe to help you understand them better. So step 1 is we admitted that we were, past tense, were. I'm not expecting you to admit powerlessness right now. You are powerful today. You have the ability to make good choices today because drugs and alcohol are not inside of you. Okay? When we take drugs and alcohol into our body, it sets off a craving in our brain. And that phenomenon of craving is something that a normal person does not have. Someone who does not have addiction does not struggle with the phenomenon of craving. And that's what makes us different from normal people. And I know that that's hard for some people to accept, that we are different, but until you can accept that and acknowledge it, then you are going to continue to struggle, because pride and ego is what's pumping you, is what's fueling you. Okay? Pride goeth before the fall. All right? I'm a very prideful person. Believe me, I know. I spent 13 years in active addiction because I didn't want to admit that I had a problem, because I didn't want to accept that I had the disease of addiction. So I stayed out trying to do things my way. I stayed out trying to figure out how I could just not have this, how I could work my way around it. And the disease of addiction has not only manifested itself in my life with drugs and alcohol, but it also leaks over into my life with food, with relationships, with sex. The disease of addiction isn't just about drugs and alcohol. It's really not even about the substance at all. It's about us on the inside, okay? We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And that power that's greater than you, that's your choice, which you choose to be your higher power. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of that power, okay? We have to come to a point where we decide, are we ready? Are we done fighting? You know, are we done trying to find every difference? Okay, here's the deal, you guys. Stop looking at the differences and find the similarities. Stop distracting yourself from the real point, which is recovery. Okay? This whole argument about whether disease is a disease or not is null and void, when all that we should be focused on is our primary purpose, which is to help others and recover. You know, I feel like when we're trying to find something wrong with something, that's distracting us from what we need to be focused on, which is learning about addiction so that way we can fight it. You know what I mean? I try to make videos to help you guys and to inspire you and to help you to see, because I was once there. I used to think too. Listen, I'm going to be real. I'm going to tell you guys how I used to be and why I stayed in my active addiction for 13 years. I stayed in my active addiction for 13 years because I didn't want to admit that I was different than other people. I didn't want to say, like, I have a problem and I can't control myself. Okay? I thought I can control. And I spent the better half of 13 years trying to control my addiction, trying to find different ways to succeed in life, to use those drugs. I tried everything. I tried only drinking alcohol. I tried, stopping the alcohol and just taking Xanax. Then that didn't work. Well, I thought, I'll just smoke pot. Pot made me crazy. Then I thought, if I can't smoke pot, then I'll just do opiates. I'll be able to live life on opiates and I'll be able to control it. And I did that and I lost all control. And with each substance that I tried, polysubstance abuser here, meth, cocaine, Xanax, hydros, Roxys, heroin, anything, basically, alcohol. I tried every way to manipulate and control my life, to be able to consume these drugs and alcohol without having negative consequences. And even with the negative consequences, I continued to use and drink. And who in their right mind continues to drink and use drugs when their life is totally fucked? Only somebody who is insane, somebody who has an addiction, who has disease. And that's the thing. People that don't have it don't have that phenomenon of craving, and they could take it or leave it. And it doesn't matter if it's opiates or if it's methamphetamine, you guys. It doesn't matter if it's a drug or alcohol that the body becomes physically dependent on. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, okay? Addiction, in our brain, we have the phenomenon of craving that a normal person will not have when they take drugs and alcohol into their body. And that's the difference between a normal person and a person who has the disease, is that they will not go through this mental obsession. Hey, Kelly. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. And I know, and here's the deal, okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Who in their right mind would continue to do a drug that they know could potentially kill them unless they struggle and they have a disease that's more powerful than they are? That's what it is. I'm not a victim, but I'm not going to fool myself either. The disease of addiction is cunning, baffling, and powerful, and it will tell you that you don't have it. And then you'll go out and you'll use and you'll die. I've seen it happen time and time again. This whole argument about whether addiction is a disease or not is total distraction from what we should be focused on, and that is our recovery and trying to work and learn more so we can recover and not die. If your addiction isn't to that point where you're at life or death, then I'm so happy for you. But that's not my experience. If I go out and use today, I will die. I will literally lose everything. And if I don't die, then I will commit suicide. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's what it is, Kelly. It's pain and this mental sickness. And unless a person has addiction, they cannot understand. You know, am I trying to be a victim? Am I trying to blame anybody for the choices I made? No, I'm not. But I'll tell you this. Me and my 3 sisters, we all did drugs and alcohol when we were younger. And me and my sister Michelle are addicts, and my sister Christine is not. My sister Christine can take it or leave it because she does not have the phenomenon of craving. She does not have that mental obsession that happens when a person that has the disease takes drugs and alcohol into their body. And that's why I try to read with you guys and teach you guys what I learned, because I'm not trying to get you guys to feel like you're less than. Okay, I'm not trying to get you guys to feel like you cannot do anything because you have the disease. Okay? But what I'm trying to do is help you to learn so that way you can fight it. A lot of addicts who have addiction, a lot of addicts have depression too, and they struggle from dual diagnosis. And what happens is we have the depression and the anxiety or the mental illness, and we self-medicate to deal with that mental illness. So I want to read to you guys about the disease, okay? Listen to this. This is written by a physician, Dr. William D. Silkworth, and he says, in this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered addiction must believe, that the body of the addict is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking or using just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality or were outright mental defectives. These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us, but we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic addict which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. So the disease affects the mind and the body. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us, or drugs. As laymen, our opinion as to its sounds may, of course, mean little. But as ex-problem drinkers and users, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. Though we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as the altruistic plane, we favor hospital. So here's the deal. The whole theory of the allergy is just a way to break it down for people who don't understand. Okay? When an addict takes drugs or alcohol into their body and their mind have an allergic reaction to that substance. And just like where a normal person will take it in, they will not have that phenomenon of craving. They will not have that allergy. And that's just a way to explain it to people so that way they can understand.
Did you not know this?
Just because, you know, you admit that you have addiction, it doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough. It doesn't mean that you should be ashamed. There's nothing to be ashamed of. All you're doing is arming yourself with the facts, and you've got to learn more about the disease. Here's the thing, you guys. Addiction wants you to be distracted. The disease wants us to be arguing about whether or not it's a disease. Because while we're arguing about shit that's already been proven, we are not focusing on recovering.
I can't see your feet.
It talks about in the big book how when we get sober, we have to smash all of our reservations. Any thought in your mind that tells you that you can still drink and use has to be smashed. Okay? Because those thoughts will be the thoughts that cause us to go out and use. And then we'll be right back to square one. It also tells us that our pride and ego, we have to let go of our pride. The most courageous, the most brave thing that you could ever do if you have the disease of addiction is to ask for help.
What?
There's nothing shameful about asking. If we all knew what was good for us, if we all had the power, we would have all left our addiction a long time ago. I know it's hard to come to terms with. I really do. I know. I spent years fighting against acceptance. I spent years trying to adjust my life so I could use and drink without having negative consequences. I spent years not asking for help and not taking suggestions. And I also spent years lying to myself. I spent years telling myself that I didn't have addiction and that I could take it or leave it. And time after time, my actions and my past experiences prove me wrong. If you don't have the disease of addiction, then why are you here? If you don't struggle with that, then I want you to take it or leave it. Whatever substance that you're taking now, that stop taking it. Do the right about face and leave it alone. And then tell me how that goes. Now, there are people who are dependent on their medications, like Suboxone. But before we got dependent on Suboxone, we were in our active addiction. Okay, when you're working a job, you guys, and you are self-employed, so you don't have to kind of check in with a boss or anything, then you will see yourself as functioning. Because, well, you can go in and you can be high on pills all day long and nobody's going to fire you. So what happens is a lot of people who have their job deal and are doing life and can pay their bills, they think, oh, well, I don't have the disease because look, I have my job. I have my house. I have my family, right? But just because you have all those things does not mean that you don't have the disease of addiction, okay? That just means that you've been able to function it's an eventual worse, never better. If you kept going in your addiction like you were, eventually all those things that you had will be gone. I promise you. I promise you. It might take time, but it would happen. There's nothing to be ashamed of, you guys. And there's also nothing to argue about, you know. Addiction is a disease. It's a mental illness, which is a disease. And the cycle of addiction is fucking crazy. I can show you guys written down on paper, and I can tell you. Trigger, thought, mental obsession. Then you pick up, and then the phenomenon of craving sets in. And that phenomenon of craving is what we have that a person who does not have the disease does not have. That's why a person who does not have disease can take drugs or leave them. That's why a person who does not have the disease will not use drugs when they're having their life fucked up. I mean, it's a distraction, you guys. It's a distraction. Don't let yourself be distracted by whether or not addiction is a disease. Okay? You could call it a mental disorder if you would like to call it a mental disorder. If that makes you feel better, but it really doesn't matter. The main thing that you got to do is come to terms with that, accept it, surrender, and then take some suggestions. Kelly, it doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, black, employed or not employed. Eventually, here's the deal. You guys, I started out a weekend warrior. Okay, I was raised in a beautiful family. I have a mom and dad. They're still married to this day. I grew up in a great house, beautiful family home on 2.5 acres with a pool. And my mom and dad, great parents, raised me so good. First time I ever tried marijuana, I didn't really like it. Then I got prescribed Percocets for a tooth that I got pulled out. I got 4 wisdom teeth pulled out, right? I wasn't dependent on my Percocet because I only had the prescription for like a couple weeks because it was just for pain for my tooth. But that phenomenon of craving to take more immediately. The minute I took opiates and they made me feel that way they made me feel, because that's what addicts and alcoholics like. We like the feeling produced by drugs and alcohol. I mean, if you're an addict or an alcoholic, you cannot tell me that you drank and used because you didn't like the way it felt. Okay? Immediately. Okay? But my addiction was progressive. It started out just, a little bit of pills here, a little bit of coke there, a little bit of meth there, a little bit of drinking here. Okay, and it all started out like that. I had a job. I had a beautiful little house that I lived in. I was being promoted at my work. I was being paid good. And what that disease does is it gets into your mind and it tells you that you're doing great and that you're making progress. And look at me, I've got a job. I can't be that bad off, right? Nobody knows. And that's the thing, you guys, everybody knows. You might not think it, but they know that you're struggling. I just know that pride and ego will take you down, guys, and you got to smash that. You got to become humble and just reach out for help. You really got to have help when you're trying to get on track. And for those of us that are tapering on Suboxone, I'm tapering off Suboxone and getting down to 6 milligrams, easy peasy. You know what I'm saying? But an addictive, yes, they don't. Hey guys, will you please go in your room and play? I'm on the phone. Okay, thanks guys. The addiction, here's the deal. Okay, so when you're like trying to come off of Suboxone and you're tapering, you know that voice that tells you if you take a little bit more that you'll feel better? You know what I'm talking about? That voice that tells you just need 2 more milligrams for the day and you'll be fine. That is the addiction. I know you guys know what I'm talking about. Sure, I'm dependent on my medication, but the disease tells me that I need to take extra. And I don't want you guys to get distracted from what you need to be working on, and that is recovering and learning about your addiction. Learn what your triggers are. Learn why that voice in your head is telling you just a few more milligrams. Okay? What is triggering that thought? Saying addiction is a disease. Hey, Nathaniel, please, baby, go play in your room. Saying addiction is a disease is not a cop-out. It's not playing the victim, you guys. It's just a fact. It's just what we have. People who have the disease, we are different than people that do not have it. If that makes you feel less than, it shouldn't. It's just what it is. It is what it is. We don't like to think that we're different than everybody else. But if we weren't, would we even be here? Like, if we weren't, we would have stopped using a long time ago. If you can do the right about face and just stop using, my hats are off to you. You must not be an addict. I want you to ask yourself, if you can do the right about face and leave the drugs and alcohol behind and never look back, then I don't think that you're an addict. That's how you need to figure it out. Think back to when you were in your active addiction. Could you take it or leave it? And see, that's the thing. He might not be an addict. Because, see, you couldn't take it or leave it, could you, girl? And that's the thing. We have to diagnose ourselves. Nobody can diagnose you an addict. So if you could take it or leave it, that you might not have the disease of addiction. And that's what happens is we get people mixing in here who don't have the disease. And they want to talk about how the disease is not a disease. And that just creates more stigma. If and when you were drinking and using, you could take it or leave it, then you're not an addict. If and when you were drinking and using, you didn't have periods of time where you used against your will, like you did not want to use, but you had to use, because then that's what us addicts go through. We go through losing the power of choice, and almost it's like a fight within our minds, a fight within ourselves to stop the using. Oh, really, Kelly? That is so awesome, girl. I'm so proud of you. But Kelly, can you, since you went cold turkey and you've stayed sober for 17 years, that is so amazing. But can you see where, like, do you think that you have the disease of addiction? Or, because if it's a struggle, like you're saying it is, wouldn't that be that it's because that mental obsession still comes every now and then, right? And that's that disease. That's that. And so I don't want anyone to feel like they're not, like you're not, it's not a bad thing. It's what it is. You know what I mean? And what it teaches us in the program, and I'm a 12-step person, but you do whatever works for you. Okay, guys, that's all I'm saying. But here's the thing, is what it tells us in the 12-step program is that acceptance is the key to our problems. When I am kind of like, here, I'll read it to you, and it's really good. It talks about, see, Kelly, you stay away from those people, places, and things, because those people, places, and things trigger you, and then, you know, if you go around those people, that addiction could kick in, could say, you know what, Kelly, it's a good idea. You know, there are some people who can take it or can go and turn their back and never go back. But those people, they really might not suffer with the disease of addiction. You know what I'm saying? And they talk about, and that's another thing, Kelly, they talk about making geographical changes. There's so many addicts and alcoholics that have made geographical changes, moved. And if you are an addict or an alcoholic, it don't matter if you move to freaking Timbuktu, you will find drugs and alcohol. Because, and that's the thing, like, I moved like 6 years ago, here where I'm at now, and I thought, I'm a fresh start, you know, I'm going to start over, I'm never going to go back. Here's the thing, you can't get away from yourself. If you're an addict, you can't get away from you. So that's what I'm trying to explain it to people, and I feel like I almost get people upset because I'm telling them that you know, acceptance and that you have the disease is only it's just half the problem. It just helps out. And here's the thing, you guys, like when we can truly concede to our innermost selves that we can no longer drink and use like I know like people, like regular people do, then that's when we can start working on our recovery. Until we can totally throw away our reservations, smash that shit. Like today, I truly know, like I can tell you guys without a shadow of a doubt that I cannot drink and I cannot use drugs. I cannot take pills that are addicting, because that will take me out. Like when I take drugs that change the way I feel, it triggers something inside of me, and I want more, and I want more, and I want more. Even being on a maintenance medication, I have really had to work hard to shut that voice and that trigger down inside of me that tells me that I need more Suboxone. Because even being on Suboxone, I could act out addictively with that. Do you see what I'm saying? And I think, George, you'll know what I'm talking about. Like when you're taking your benzos, we have to tell ourselves that we cannot, like it's an internal battle, and it's an internal dialogue. And but I'm telling you guys, like, you're not less than because you have the disease of addiction. You're not, like, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Don't let that pride and ego keep you sick. Do not let pride and ego hold you back from recovering, because part of recovering is acceptance and surrender and knowing that you cannot go back. I know it's not enough. I know that feeling. Right, Kelly. So you just stay away from... I love reading these stories to you guys. Would you guys like me to read one of these stories for you? Okay, let's do this. Okay, we're going to read this story. Let me find this one. Okay. I love this book. This is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you guys. And if you don't believe in the 12 steps, at least get this book and read it. Because what it does is it shares with you the doctor's opinion from 1934, when they first decided that addiction and alcoholism was a disease. And that's when they first decided, hey, this is a disease of the mind and the body. It affects both. And that was back in the dizzy in 1934. Or the NA. Yes, they're both very good. So here we go. Trying to navigate separate worlds was a lonely charade that ended when this gay alcoholic finally landed in AA. Okay, I wish that Jason could come be here to listen to this, but here we go. It's called Tightrope. Page 359 in the big book. Drinking was always a part of my family background. All the men in my family drank. My father and later my brothers were heavy drinkers. As long as a person held down a job, didn't embarrass his family or friends too frequently, and kept out of trouble, he was entitled to get drunk on a regular basis. Drinking was an adult thing to do, a part of growing up. I don't believe it ever crossed my mind that I shouldn't drink. I was raised in a conservative religion, and I commuted to religious schools some distance from home. Because I had a quick mind and was comfortable with academics, I became something of a teacher's pet. As a result, I was a serious, shy, somewhat bookish child and teenager who found it difficult to relate to my peers. So when I went away to college, I was an alcoholic waiting to happen. My relation to alcohol was an affair from the very beginning. Although I wasn't too thrilled with the taste, I loved the effect. Alcohol helped me to hide my fears. The ability to converse was an almost miraculous gift to a shy and lonely individual. It was at this time that I also began to struggle with the question of my sexuality. For me, the idea of being homosexual, the word gay, wasn't then in common use. Drinking helped me to forget and evade. So here we go. Already, he's using alcohol, or if drugs, you could put drugs in this spot. He's using drugs to cope with his feelings on the inside about his homosexuality. It helped him to forget. Also, it provided some cover. When you are drunk, people are not surprised at an inability or disinclination to make any serious moves toward a woman. This struggle continued throughout years of unsuccessful dating and pretending. When I eventually decided to act on my desires, the guilt and the shame, as well as the drinking, increased. Guilt and shame is what fuels our addiction a lot of the times. Now I had to hide not only my thoughts, but also my... I always tried to project the image of the conservative, masculine, deep-voiced loner with the mysterious, possibly tragic, but always heterosexual love affair in the past. I wound up living two separate and distinct lives, that of the gay man with friends and interests to match, and that of the straight man with a totally separate set of friends and interests. I had to walk this tightrope while trying to build a solid professional life as well. After college, I had gone on to a law school, where drinking on a daily basis became the norm. I justified myself with the thought that a few drinks helped me to relax and focus on my studies. Somehow, I managed to do well in law school and to land several prestigious legal positions afterward. I soon learned that I could not drink during the day. If I had even one drink at lunch, the rest of the afternoon would be lost. Instead, I postponed my drinking until immediately after work and would then make up for lost time. Work in a law firm added a third side to my already divided life. Now I had to try to maintain social relations with clients, members, and associates of the firm, in addition to my gay and straight friends from my private life. Needless to say, as the drinking increased, things became ever more confused. Eventually, the pressures became too great. I had formed a serious relationship and decided that I could no longer carry on the deception. Instead, I would change careers and go into teaching. So here he is. He's already trying to move his life around so he can drink. For a while, things seemed to be going well, but the slide toward active alcoholism was slowly accelerating. I had had my first blackout several years before. At the time, I told myself that if I ever happened again, I would stop drinking. Nate! Hold on, guys. Nathaniel! Nate! What are you doing? Nate! Nathaniel! Are you okay? Oh, okay. Lord mercy. They're playing a gun game on the Nintendo and they're screaming and it scared me. They're having so much fun. Okay. So he said if he had a blackout again, he would stop. Well, it happened again. It happened again and again and again, but I didn't stop. So right here, he has told himself, like, if I have a blackout, I'm going to stop. But again, he's drinking against what he wants to do. He knows it's bad for him. He knows he's having negative consequences. He knows that he's hurting himself, but he still can't stop. I was always able to come up with some explanation, excuse, or rationalization that justified my continued drinking. In time, personality changes began to occur with regularity when I drank. I had always had a sharp tongue when drinking. I frequently became vitriolic. I don't know what that means. At other times, I could be charming and affectionate, sometimes too much so. People never knew just what I would do or say. After a few years, I was a nightly blackout drinker. My lover drank heavily as well, and I began to compare my drinking with his. I argued to myself that I could not have a problem because his drinking was worse than mine. In fact, I suggested that he might try AA. When he did try this fellowship, I did all I could to undermine his efforts to get sober. His recovery would present an obvious, if unacknowledged, threat to my drinking. Eventually, the stress became too much and we broke up, but not before I had succeeded in undermining his recovery. The slide continued. Most of my friends were unwilling to put up with my conduct. The verbal and sometimes physical abuse, the midnight phone calls, the forgotten invitations, and the selfish disregard of anything but my own need to drink. Those few friends who did not withdraw were forced away by my resentments and increasing paranoia. I cut people out of my life, refusing to return phone calls and ignoring them when we met by chance. By the end of my drinking, only 2 people were willing to have anything to do with me on a social basis, and both were heavy drinkers who were not surprised by my actions. So right here, every person that he had as a friend, any person that wasn't doing the drinking like he was, he cut them out of his life. And now he's all that he has surrounding himself is people that drink like him. How many of you guys have been in your active addiction and all the people that you had in your life you got rid of unless they were an addict like you, unless they were shooting dope like you, unless they were taking pills like you? Because we don't want to have people around us who aren't doing that, because then they're going to tell us about ourselves. So we need people around us that do the same shit, so that way we're not ashamed. The cases in which disaster struck when I drank outside my home, I made inappropriate passes at parties or at people at work, both men and women. At other times, I awakened battered or with my watch or wallet missing, or in the company of strangers whose names I did not remember and did not want to know. I cannot tell you guys how many times I blacked out, woke up, and was at some dude's house, naked as a jaybird, and didn't even know his name. There were the inevitable injuries and accidents. I was ejected from bars because I would steal tips or change from bartenders or other customers to pay for drinks. I could no longer afford it. At other times, I would get into arguments and be forced to leave. In consequence, I made the seemingly logical decision not to drink outside the house. Instead, most of my drinking was now solitary. When I left work, I would have a few stiff drinks at dinner and then go home. So right here, he has isolated himself. It's just him and his drink. I cannot tell you guys how I can, I isolated myself to where it was just me and my needle. Because heaven forbid I had anybody I had to share with. And Neil, my husband, man, I would do anything I could to hide the amount I had so I didn't have to share with him. I would stop off at the kitchen to pick up a glass, some ice, some mixer. I would go to my bedroom where I kept half-a-gallon bottles of gin and vodka and read while the ice melted. The mixer ran out and sometimes the glass broke. Every night was blackout drinking. The really bad times were when I would have to struggle outside to a liquor store or bar late at night, weaving and trying to stagger because I had miscalculated and run out of alcohol. I found it increasingly difficult to do anything more than work and drink. I was afraid to use public transportation or even to walk on the streets. My stomach was constantly upset and my doctor had diagnosed a number of intestinal disorders. Even though I rarely drank away from home, my body was covered with bruises because I often fell down during blackouts. I never wore short-sleeve shirts, even in the summer, because people would ask me about the bruises. One morning, I woke up with a numb leg and found that I had somehow ruptured 2 spinal discs while in a blackout at home. I cannot tell you guys. I would wear these long-sleeve shirts underneath my work shirt because I didn't want anybody to see my arms. Because I would shoot up and then I would pass out. I would nod out. And I had bruises and track marks everywhere. For the last 4 years, I lived alone in a small house. The ceiling of one room had collapsed and plaster dust was everywhere, coating the garbage and newspaper that littered the floor.
Empty food cartons, beer cans, bottles, and dirty clothes lay everywhere. I had gotten a cat because the mice were out of control, but I was not conscientious about cleaning up after the cat. If it's not surprising that I had few visitors and neighbors tended to avoid me. The last few months were filled with fear and self-pity. I began to contemplate suicide with increasing regularity, yet I was afraid of dying. I remember thinking that this life would go on, never getting better and slowly fading to nothing. Then I began to hear the whispers. I became convinced that there were people living in my house. I couldn't see them, except for occasional glimpses out the corner of my eyes, and so I concluded that they were small and somehow living in the walls or under the stairs. I could hear them plotting to kill me. There were nights when I went to bed with a knife in hand to protect myself. Other nights, I locked myself in the bathroom so they couldn't get me. One night, I left a shot of vodka on the mantelpiece so they would go after that and leave me alone. Then a miracle occurred. An evening came when I decided to have one drink outside and then go straight home. I had that drink and left for my house. The next thing I remember is waking up the next morning with a stranger I had picked up in a bar. Apparently, I had gone on autopilot, and in a blackout resulting from just one drink had gone on a tear. The look of disgust and pity on the face of that stranger was the jolt I needed. I suddenly realized that my life was totally insane, that my drinking was out of control, and that I was either an alcoholic or a candidate for committal to the local asylum. Not wanting to be locked up, I decided to try AA. I called my former lover, and he put me in contact with an individual who took me to my first meeting. Although I can barely recall anything about the meeting, I heard two things I have never forgotten. The first was, "You do not have to drink again." This was a total revelation to me. For a long time, I had believed that alcohol was the one few positive thing left in my life. I looked forward to my first drink every evening and thought alcohol was holding my life together. I had to survive, let alone to have any comfort. Yet here, people who had been in the same boat were telling me that I did not have to drink. I don't think I believed them that night, but it gave me enough hope to avoid drinking the rest of the day. The second thing I heard was, "You don't have to be alone anymore." This too was a revelation. For years I had rejected or been rejected by friends, lovers, family, and God. I was alone and afraid. My life had narrowed to work in the bottle, and work remained in the pitcher only because it was necessary to enable me to buy the bottle. The isolation and loneliness that alcoholism brought weighed heavily on me, and those words lifted an immense burden of fear. Again, I'm not sure that I completely believed, but I felt hope for the first time in years. I did not fall in love with AA at first. The man who took me to my first meeting later became my first sponsor and had to put up with the objections, arguments, questions, and doubts. Everything a trained but very muddled legal mind could throw at him. He was gentle with me. He did not push his opinions on me. He had the sense to see that I was so afraid and so used to being alone that I could not face a hard sell approach. So here's the deal. I'm a hard sell approach. I'm not for everybody, you guys. But I'm going to tell you like it is. And if you are willing to make the changes and take suggestions, then you can get sober. He listened to my questions, answered some, and suggested that I could best answer others myself. He refused to argue, but was willing to explain and share his own experiences. And that's all I'm trying to do here, is share my experience with you guys. I had asked him to be my sponsor before I knew what he did for a living, and felt I could not back out of the relationship when I discovered he was a minister. My alcoholism and my lifestyle had led me to reject the religion and the God of my upbringing. I had never replaced them. Instead, I was an agnostic, doubting the existence of God, but afraid to say so in a case I was wrong. My self-pity and sense of victimization led me to doubt that a caring God could exist. If he did, why had he given me so many problems? I was very, very weary of the members who talked of their spiritual lives. My sponsor was a living damper on my intolerance, but even more, he told me that it would be all right for me to doubt God, that AA was not a religious program, and that to belong, I did not have to adhere to any beliefs. He suggested that for me, a good starting point would simply be recognition of the fact that I had failed in running the world. In short, acceptance of the fact that I was not God. He also suggested that I might try occasionally to act as if I believed. Somewhere I had heard that it is easier to act yourself into a new way of thinking than to think yourself into a new way of acting. And this made sense in the context of acting as if. So instead of trying to like tear apart and analyze and find the difference, just act as if. Don't be too smart for your own good. I also thought that the people in meetings sometimes seem too standoffish. Uh-oh, hold on. Hold on, guys. Nate! Okay, sorry, guys. I also thought that people in meetings... meetings seem too standoffish and overly concerned with their friends and acquaintances, rather than with me, the newcomer. Well, on my way towards developing a resentment, I expressed this to my sponsor. He suggested that I might find people more communicative if I took the coffee-making commitment for the group I had joined. Although I was far too special to make coffee, I did figure that as a coffee maker, I would have the chance to select decent cookies, and so I agreed. My sponsor was right again. People did start to speak with me, if only to complain about the coffee and the cookies. But once a conversation starts, communication frequently continues. I started to work on the steps, and even with difficulty over the third step and the God concept, I began to develop a sense of trust in AA and in the ideas of the fellowship and a manifestation of a power greater than myself. Although for many years I did not come to an acceptance of God who intervened personally and directly in the lives of individuals, I was able to accept the idea of a force that moved in the rooms and animated AA members with a sense of unconditional love. That satisfied my spiritual needs for a long time. A later sponsor took me through steps 8 and 9 and provided me with support during some trying times. In my third year of sobriety, I was bedridden for as a result of the early injury to my spinal discs. My father died, a relationship ended, and the AIDS epidemic started to hit home among my friends and acquaintances. Over the course of that and the next few years, almost half my gay friends died.
Mommy?
Yeah.
Eli's supposed to be and hurt me.
Are you guys okay? Why are y'all fighting?
Yeah, he hurt me too.
Okay.
He got in the way of the TV when I couldn't play the game.
Okay, truce.
No, he did this and he hurt me.
Do y'all need to take a break?
Put him away at his house.
Well, baby, we gotta wait till his daddy gets here. Roger gets here.
It is here. He is here.
Nate, do y'all want to separate for a little bit?
What's separating?
Do you want to go back? Is Roger home? Do you want to go home, baby?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. Well, you guys be nice to each other, okay?
Cover outside, we'll play with you.
Be truce. Hey, y'all truce with each other. Okay. It was in the period that I started to turn service beyond the group level. I had helped in founding the first gay A group in my part of town and was elected general service representative. I knew nothing of general service at the time, and I decided to learn what it was all about so I could do a decent job and be able to pass it on to his successor as quickly as possible. So he started the first gay AA meeting. And the whole thing is, you guys, this is so cool because he just became willing. That's all. That's all you have to do is become willing. And it doesn't have to all make sense to you. You don't have to dissect everything. You just have to be willing. In all these positions, I never felt obligated to conceal or deny my sexuality. I have always felt that the representatives of groups in my area were concerned only with how we carried the message of recovery, not with what I might do in my personal life. When I first came to this fellowship, I had lost my health and sanity, my friends, much of my family, and my self-respect. In the years since, all these have been restored to me. I no longer have the sense of impending doom. I no longer wish for death or stare at myself in the mirror with loathing. I have come to terms with my higher power after more than a dozen years in AA. I was able to join a religious group and have now become active in that organization. I have a full, happy life with friends and loving family. Recently, I retired and have begun to travel throughout the world. I have attended and felt welcome at AA meetings wherever I have gone. Even more important, I have returned to my home group and I'm still making coffee. I now have an extended family that is international in scope, all the members of which are joined by the bonds of shared pain and joy. And that's what brings us all together, is the bond of our shared pain and joy. You know, we've all been down that in our addiction. We've all been hopeless. We've all, you know, and we're all ready to surrender. And that's all it is. Like, don't be distracted, you guys, okay? Don't be distracted with the arguments of whether addiction is a disease. You know, it really doesn't even matter. All that matters is that you're willing to accept change. All that matters is that you know that you need help and you can't do this alone. So, Jason, I'm so glad you came over, because that story. Yeah? Are y'all fighting? These kids, I swear to God. Oh, you guys. Oh, we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character. Where are these damn promises? Probably down. I'm sure I'll have it highlighted. Well, anyway, the promises say that we will find peace, that we will know how to handle situations that usually baffle us. That we will find that we will no longer have like problems with our, it says we will no longer fear like economic problems, like our financial problems. Anyway, these, I'm going to find it. When I find it, then I'll read it with you guys. But anyway, the promises will come true for you if you just surrender and accept and take suggestions. And I'm telling you guys, miracles will happen in your life. I'm recovering. I'm recovering from a seamlessly, from a hopeless state of mind and body. Like, I might not be all the way off the box zone, you guys, but like, my life is totally different. My whole life has changed. I don't have to go out and shoot dope anymore. I don't have to, you know, give my body to men for just a little bit of drugs. I love myself. I'm learning to change. I'm learning to become a better person. And that's all because of what the 12 steps have done for me. That's all because of my higher power and my connection with God. I could have never done this on my own. I could have never done it. I tried. I tried for so many years. So, I love you guys. Yeah, I do need a new phone. I'm going to get off here and charge it up. We've been on for an hour and 6 minutes. This is an awesome live. I love doing these with you guys. I love reading with you guys these stories. I love sharing with you guys my experience. I'm not trying to make any of you feel less than. I'm not trying to push my opinions on you. I'm just trying to share with you guys. It doesn't matter what you think about addiction. It doesn't matter if you think it's a disease. What matters is that we have to fight this and we have to recover. And it is whatever you got to tell yourself, okay? I just want